Yeah, hi, my name is Josh Deere. I'm the Assistant Athletic Director for Communications at Concordia St. Paul.
And you also have a degree from Concordia. So tell us how your degree path got you to where you are now. I'm assuming it wasn't a straight line.
No, it wasn't. So I attended North Dakota State for my first year of college, and my goal was to be in radio broadcasting. I wanted to have a sports radio talk show. And I did 1 year at NDSU, and the institutional fit wasn't the right spot for me. Um, and I think people watching this will understand when you're at Concordia, you're in a room with maybe maximum 20 to 25 people. I don't know that I ever attended a class that had more than that. Most of them had 10-ish students. Um, North Dakota State, I would sit in a history course with a lecture hall full of people, 150, 200, I don't know. And it felt impersonal. It was not my learning style. So when I decided to transfer, I was looking for places to go. I found Concordia because they had a communications major that also had a sports information track, and this is 20 years ago, um, early 2000s. Um, not to allow this to be unusable for the future. So early
Right.
2000s. So I found that unique, and I wanted to pursue it, and so I met with some professors and got more information and thought it was a really good fit. So I came, and the sports information track part of it, I didn't know anything about. I didn't know what sports information was, even though that's essentially the role I cover for my title doesn't have that in it, but that's the role I cover for an NCAA institution having a sports information director. So I went to school, continued to work through towards my degree and completing it, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I had sort of punted on being in radio and just was looking for something that I wanted to do with my life that um, valued my time. Right. So we need a paycheck. We all need a paycheck. Everyone that graduates from Concordia will have to go find employment and get paid for it. But I wanted the job that I did to be more meaningful than just what the paycheck was. I wanted to enjoy it and find fulfillment in it. And it wasn't until my third year of college when I had a sports management course that was taught by the athletic director at the time. His name is David Herbster. He's now at South Dakota, where I really started to kind of find a groove and come into my own. The first thing I did in in sport management ever was I was a ticket taker for a conference basketball tournament. Um, they needed people, so he came to class and said, "I need some volunteers that can help with this." So I threw my hat in the ring and did it. A little later in the semester, we had an assignment to write a certain number of articles about sports, and it could be anything we wanted. So I just picked a few current events that were happening and turned my work in like any other assignment. And he got back to me and said that I should intern with his sports information director. So that's how I ended up finding what I did. Once I found that, it didn't take me long to really decide that's what I wanted to pursue and stay involved with. And I wasn't sure how that road would play in the long run, but I knew I liked it. And so I found my so to answer your question more specifically and directly, I knew what I wanted to do with my degree before I had one. And I started to turn my college coursework and experience into relevant application for what I wanted to do with my career. And that made my schoolwork a lot better also.
Yeah, I was going to say you probably went about it the reverse way than 90% of the students who are out there to explore as they should, right? I mean, when you say sports management or sport admin, it's college, it's high school, it's ops, it's marketing, it's fundraising, it's game day, it's sports information, it's coaching. There, I mean, there's a plethora of opportunities, and that can be overwhelming. So for you getting your toes wet, so to speak, figuring out that, oh my gosh, I like this portion of sports and athletics, that definitely could help you craft the rest of your what you're going to get out of your degree for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to anybody, whether it's sports information or whatever you want to go into, you need to find what you're going to be passionate about. And then once you find that, just attack it and dive in. When you're in college, that's the point, is to dive in and learn and grow and be willing to take risks and be willing to put in whatever you need to get out of it that you're going to benefit from in the long run.
Right. Totally. Totally. So speaking of the job that you do now, talk us through, a year in the life, a week in the life, a day in the life. Obviously, there's seasons and cycles as the NCAA sports come and go, but I'm sure other duties as assigned are always finding their way on your plate as well. So if someone were thinking about wanting to be in sports information, what are some typical things that you're encountering on a weekly, monthly, seasonal basis?
Yeah, so you're right. There's no like a day in the life or a week in the life of. It is seasons and they rotate and revolve and overlap. Um, I always say that the most exciting times to be in my job are the busy times when the hours do stack up, and sometimes that does kind of suck. Um, Being away from family or whatever, but it's also the most exciting times because games are happening, more sports are happening, so you're bouncing from one to the next, and that's that's when like busy is good, right?
Hmm.
So I would say that we base our duties as an administrative team on sort of the home event calendar. Okay, so when we are kind of unloading what we're going to be doing for a week, we meet as a team and we go through what's at home and what are the challenges that we're going to be facing. Are people going to be missing from our team, whether that's sports information specifically or the rest of the admin staff who all perform their specific roles? If people are missing, how are we going to fill the gaps? So we kind of work through basing everything around what's going to be at home. And I think it's what's important with that is you want to have your home games feel like home games to your student athletes and your coaches and the people who support them. And it's really important to make sure that you're putting on a good display and that you're really treating that like it matters a lot. So that's kind of how we start and go. The rest of it for sports information specifically, we're communicating with our counterparts at the other schools that we're competing against, sending each other rosters, pronunciation guides. We share those pronunciation guides with our play-by-play people who do our webcasts and our PA announcers who do the announcing in the venues. We're sharing information about which media will be attending and how we can service their needs, if any. We handle the staffing of all of our personnel for timers and press box workers. So people that run the scoreboard and the clocks, people who take pictures. We have somebody who does our webcasting that oversees that is an outside party, but there are times where we're working on staffing those events too if that person is not staffed for a game. So we're kind of building up our staff and making sure that everything is covered. If things aren't covered, it's on me to find people. So I spend a lot of my Monday meeting with our administrative team and then meeting with my staff to make sure that they are ready to do what they need to do, and then trying to fill in any holes with game schedules for the weekend on working and who's coming and going. And then usually I start to try to attack. Like in the fall season, I oversee football as a sport for sports information, so I will start doing football notes and preview stuff and collecting information and two deeps. And football it's a beast. So everything takes time. There's 100 guys on everyone's team. Everyone has two deeps that have to be typed out manually because no one has the same format. And what people don't know is that stuff takes time. And I usually start that on like a Tuesday, and I start writing various notes and getting things ready for the weekend, game program, design and all layout and all that stuff. Has to be turned in by Thursday. So it's once my Monday's over, I'm really sort of like closing my door and just like attacking my keyboard. But then once the football season cycles out, for me individually, it loosens up a little bit. I also oversee lacrosse, which doesn't have two deeps, which doesn't have 100 people on a roster. So game programs are faster and more efficient. The sharing of information is much smoother. So that process takes me less time, which is great. We manage our website. So we are always making sure that our content is coming out in a staggered fashion throughout the week so that you don't post your cross country preview on a Tuesday morning and then that's buried by a soccer preview 2 hours later. We try to give everything a little bit of space to breathe, and so that it doesn't stack up and pile up too much and get lost in the shuffle. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
No, I think that's important to know because students, not that this is right or wrong, but I think they see the glory and the glamour of right endorsements and Final Fours and all of this stuff. But there is a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that those games would never happen if you didn't have transportation figured out, if you didn't have rosters figured out, if you didn't have referees, if you didn't have somebody unlocking the doors to the gym, right? I mean, like there's so many behind the scenes things that yes, you can be out there and be Minnesota Twins and Vikings and fancy stuff, but there's also a lot of grunt work that goes on behind the scenes to make this stuff look seamless and pretty.
Yeah, and they're all doing the same stuff. There's just more of them.
Right, totally. Which brings me to my next question. How do you feel like working at an NCAA Division II level looks different than potentially high school athletic admin or professionals or even, City of St. Paul community ed type stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have a little bit of familiarity with sort of the differences between the divisions. So, like the University of Minnesota staff is bonkers to me.
Yeah.
Now, they all work hard and they have things that they have to do and they have to do them well at a high level and fast. And I get that. But it seems bonkers to me that they have like 6 people that do my job or more that are full time, plus graduate interns and right an army of people who want to get involved because they have 40,000 students there. Then they also have a digital team, they have a creative team, and sort of all that stuff here is handled by less than 5 people, right? So they've got, and go look at like the LSU staff directory page if you're interested. You look at their athletic communication staff, then you look at their publications and creative and digital, and they've got 25 people for every single one of those departments. It's nuts. So that's that. Division One's not all that though. That's not all. That's the Power Five. Division One staffs are usually a little bit more robust than ours, but still not like that. They're not like that. They have similar demands that they have to perform too. A lot of the Division One schools have their games on like ESPN3. People with ESPN3 on like their Roku can hop on and watch just about any sort of college basketball game they want to. So there's a lot of pressure on the person that's doing athletic communications to do similar level and efficient work and being thorough as well and accurate as there is on the person at the University of Minnesota. So that's sort of the differences between those two. Division II, most are a full-time person and a graduate assistant, or a full-time person and 2 GAs, or a full-time and an assistant, 2 to 3 people. Some have 4. We're lucky we have 4. I think we're in a pretty good staffing situation compared to some of our peers. The schools that are Division II with hockey usually have a little bit more. There's usually 1 more full-time person involved on their staffs. And then you have Division III, which is usually 1 head SID, and then usually some, what I find around here locally with like the MIAC and the UMAC is they have somebody on staff that is an assistant coach in a sport and also assists the sports information director to try to get through all of the events they have. All those schools have hockey too. We don't have hockey, so I don't know how they get through some of they have more sports than we do. I don't know how they do it. Expectations, I think, are a little different. So some of the ways that we're doing previews and recaps, maybe they're not expected to do the same sorts of things. But they're still very good at what they do, and their jobs are to get in the media. We're in the 13th largest media market here in the Twin Cities, and it's a challenge with all the pro sports and the University of Minnesota and high schools taking all of that oxygen out of the room. High schools, I'm not very familiar with high school athletic departments. I've never worked in one. I've never interned in one. So I don't have a great answer for what somebody that I would be doing at a high school level. I have a feeling that there's not a whole lot happening there. And I know that from just checking out a website. If I'm at a game with my kids in my community and I'm interested in something, I'll try to find like their schedule and results, and it's harder. Or I'll get the game program, the roster game program, the front and back sheet, and it has the rosters on it, but there's not a schedule and results, or there's no standings. So it's somebody that's probably not devoted to doing this full time, is my assumption. I don't know how that works though. And then community, Jen, I think you probably have a better answer for that than I would, based on what you're doing at MSU. But I would assume it's a lot of organization of Parks and Rec and finding volunteer coaches and making sure that every team has a coach and assistant coach and that there's equipment for everybody and field times is how I would envision somebody with like working in the city where I live in doing what they need to be doing. But there's not like somebody that's keeping stats at games and hiring PA announcers and stuff like that. They're probably not doing the same sorts of things that I'm doing.
Right, totally. And I think hearing you talk about the behind the scenes and the communications, do you think it, and I think your answer is going to be no, but is it necessary for a student to have athletic experience themselves? It's not going to hurt, right? You need to know the vernacular of the sports, but people shouldn't be turned away from sports management or athletic communications or any of that if they weren't an athlete themselves, because just the things that you listed, that would apply whether it's an athletic department or an advancement department or admission. I mean, there's a lot of overlapping skills.
Yeah, so no, you have to know what you're doing. Okay. So does that mean you have to have played every single sport? No. Like I'm not a cross country runner. I get bored after like 5 minutes of running. It's not for me. But that doesn't mean that I can't learn and understand the concepts of that sport, right? I can't hit a golf ball straight to save my life, but I understand how to report on scores in golf and try to make a compelling article that people would want to read about our golf team. So understanding sport is a requirement, but being in a sport is not. And I've had all sorts of interns in the past that have had a varying level of sport participation, whether it's something that they played into high school and didn't make it past their freshman or sophomore year, or whether they excelled here as an athlete at Concordia St. Paul. And I've had people that have come from other campuses to intern as well, with similar sort of backgrounds. And what I mean by that is any, right?
Yeah.
But you have to have an understanding of the concepts of the sports we're covering.
Yep. For sure, for sure. And I think that's a message that we do want to put out there. We have a lot of our students who are student athletes choosing sport management or exercise science or sports psychology, but that that doesn't have to be a barrier for you if you aren't a college athlete. There's still plenty of, if you love the sport and I mean, some people love stats. I think about my brother who just memorized the backs of all the baseball cards, back in the day, and
That was
yeah,
me.
he could just throw all the Minnesota Twins as however many home runs and ERA, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And he just,
that's
yeah, yeah,
that. That was me, and that's why this job is for me.
yeah.
When I realized like what we were going to be doing in this job, I was like, oh my god! Like so in 2003 or four or whatever, we made media guides, right? So like books, programs, basically little baseball cards on every page for everybody. And I was like, oh my god, that's all the stuff I do in my head all the time, and now I can just like lay it on paper and make it my own. That's great. Like I'm perfect for this. This is perfect for me. So yes, that is exactly it. That's what I'm talking about. You find your passion and you go at it,
Right.
right? That's when I figured it out. That was like my light bulb, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome. So speaking of finding your passion, who do you pay attention to in the industry that is, top of their game, or how are you staying relevant with professional development? Are there conventions you get to go to? Are there certain people you read about? Is there research that comes out? How do you make sure that you're staying on top of your game?
Yeah, good question. So the organization that I belong to is called the College Sports Communicators, and that is a rebranded name. It's very fresh. As of like the last time we had a convention in June, it was COSIDA,
Oh,
College
right.
Sports
Yeah.
Information Directors of America. Um, Sports information directors, no one knows what they are or what they do. And the duties that we've taken on in the last 10, 15 years have expanded or shifted. And maybe like the importance is different by campus, right? So some think it's social media is the most important thing. Some think your website is. Some think being really good at doing stats at games is important. And so the idea was to make the tent bigger. College sports communicators can involve creatives and stuff like that. So, anyways, that's the organization. It has been around for quite some time, 50 years or something like that. The convention is great. It has programming. You can learn about a variety of topics. There are hands-on things that you can do where you bring your laptop, and you can sort of like play along with the presenters and learn and grow like while you're doing it. There's also just lectures. There's round tables where you can sit and ask questions in small groups. We have programming throughout the year where there will be various Zoom sessions where you can hop in, and if a topic is interesting to you, or if you just have time, whether the topic's interesting to you or not, you hop in and learn about it. So that's that part of it in terms of professional development. People that I think are at the top of their game, um, for people who watch a lot of hockey, there is the SID from Minnesota State Mankato. You probably know who he is, Paul Allen. Recently announced his retirement, and so he's in his last week of work right now. We're in mid-December, and he's been getting a lot of publicity through like the Wild games and anywhere else you'll watch hockey. They've thrown a graphic up. They've listed his achievements, his career. He's at the top of his game. He's retiring. He's still great. He's a legend. I've learned a lot from him over 20 years. I would always consider him to be the person that I would look to if I need to talk about something and bounce an idea off of something. Kelly Loft from Southwest Minnesota State is another one. Kelly has been at this a little bit longer than I have and was somebody that I looked up to right away. Other than that, I would say that my goal is to always keep tabs on what others are doing and to make sure that the things that we're doing are better than what they're doing. And it's a competitive natured sport or industry, right? Where does that mean that I can cover the swim and dive team the same way that I can cover our football team or our basketball team? That's not necessarily what I'm trying to do because we don't have the resources to do all those things. I want to make sure that we give our sports better coverage at Concordia than they're going to receive if they go somewhere else. And I don't care what sport that is for. We're going to try to raise the bar and beat other people.
I love it. That's a soundbite all in itself. What have you learned, Josh, both professionally and personally about this industry? Maybe something that you'd wish you could go back and tell your former self, or something that you would, say, gosh, hey, I learned this stuff in a textbook, but until you're actually in the real world, you don't have these aha moments. So maybe some professional or personal aha moments.
So that last part that you talked about is really, really interesting to me, the textbook part. One thing I wish I could do is go back and this is going to sound bonkers when I say this, but like you only get so many credits in college. Okay. And then you graduate and you move on. I don't regret anything I did for the classes I took and the path that I took. I found it really valuable. I was a minor in history, which is not super relevant to what I do, but I loved the courses and the instructors and found that really compelling. My advisor would always tell me to take photography classes, to take just to be on the sword, right, for the newspaper. And I never did those things. And my former self thinks maybe I should have done that. But everything comes at a cost, right? So I wouldn't change anything, but I wish I could have done that at the same time. So if that makes sense to you. But then the flip side of what you're saying is, things that you learned in a textbook that you didn't experience. It's important that you say that to your students, and I want to reiterate that. That's one thing I was good at, was just getting out and being at games and learning and networking with the other people that had similar titles as me at the time, like graduate assistants. We were in it for 2 years. You're working on a master's, and at the same time you're doing like real world application on the fly, right? Like I was in charge of stuff. Networking with the other people at other campuses that I'm still connected with today. That's the most important, and making things relevant, making your academic journey relevant to what you want to be doing with the rest of your life. And you got to find a way to do that. And I think that makes the textbook pop, in my opinion. When you're able to do that, it makes the textbook way more relevant.
Yeah, that makes sense. Final question. If you were hiring somebody for a graduate assistant or somebody who was going to replace you, everybody comes out of college with a diploma and a degree, and you've learned from the same textbooks, you've sat in the same classes. So theoretically, everybody's equal across the board with their, the whatever it says on paper. But what's going to make somebody stand out in the sports information world? Like, what's going to be that extra little zing that's going to catch your eye? What do they need to exude to impress you?
Writing and experience, without a doubt. Writing is sort of like the backbone of everything we do. And I don't want to scare people who don't think they're good writers. I was not a good writer. I was not a great high school student. I was average in a huge high school, right? Like middle of the road. I still remember getting an A on a paper in college at NDSU, thinking it was like, I was like, oh my God, I got an A on that paper. Like that really like hit me. I was like, I did that. That's weird. And then I did like probably didn't think about it again the rest of the semester or year or whatever, right? Um, didn't think I was a good writer until I started doing this job and realized that the things that I knew and cared about, I could communicate through my fingertips. So writing's important, and just because you don't do it now, or maybe don't, if you're not, don't think you're good at it yet, doesn't mean you can't be. Um, Learning and applying is more important, and you'll figure out how to write, but you need to figure out how to write because it's something that is at the core of everything I do every single day. When you're applying for jobs, and this is actually true whether you want to be in this particular industry, sports information and communications, or if you want to be a coach or an athletic director or an athletic trainer or whatever it is, you need to learn how to write, because when somebody is looking at 100 resumes and cover letters, you're not automatically disqualified for not being really good, but you can be disqualified for being really bad at writing and coming across poorly and not necessarily really being able to relay why you're good for that position, why you're good for that school. A lot of people think why the position is good for them, and that's what they like to say when they're applying for a job. But employers want to hear the opposite. So you need to learn how to write. And then experience. So dive in, find an internship that's right up your alley. And people may not be looking for interns or whatever, and maybe you can't afford to be a volunteer intern. Everyone has different personal situations, but find a way to get experience. And when you're in college, when you're in grad school, that's the time to do it. And it's hard. It's a hard time to, like, I quit my job to be an intern, and that was hard. And I found a way to get through the rest of college. Not everyone can figure that out, but try to find a way, because the experience really counts. When I'm looking at a resume, I'm looking at the experiences that they've done, and I see candidate A comes across great. They had a 3.9 GPA or whatever, and then candidate B didn't have the grades or doesn't talk about their grades, maybe doesn't even put their degree, what it was, on their resume. But when they submitted the writing samples, like, oh yeah, that's great, this is perfect, this person knows how to do this job already. That's what matters way more to me.